All right, so we're back. And this time, we're diving into a game that, well, I still boot up every now and then, even after all this time. Spider-Man on the PS4. It's been 5 years since it swung onto the scene, but it still feels fresh, you know?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
definitely stood the test of time.
Totally. And we've been checking out reviews from, let's see, we've got Jay's reviews, IGN, and Jeremy Jan's. And it's kind of wild how much they all loved just swinging around the city.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it's more than just a cool gimmick. These reviewers, they all talk about actually feeling like Spider-Man, and that's huge GE for a superhero game.
Right. Like, it's not just about getting from point A to B. It's that sense of freedom, the speed, the momentum as you swing through those concrete canyons. Jay's reviews even mentioned how much the sound design adds to the experience, especially when you're whooshing past those water towers.
Oh, absolutely. It's those little details, the way the sound design feeds into the feeling of movement that elevate the experience. It becomes visceral, engages all your senses to really sell the fantasy. You're not just controlling Spider-Man, you're inhabiting him.
And that kind of feeds into the combat system too, right? Everyone keeps comparing it to the Batman Arkham games. But what I find interesting is that Spider-Man manages to be so satisfying, even though it's, well, maybe a tad simpler.
I think you're spot on. It's not always about having the most complex system. It's about how it feels to play. Jeremy Jans called it badass, and honestly, he's not wrong. It's about mastering the flow of combat, using your webs, gadgets, acrobatics. You really feel that sense of power as you string together combos and take down enemies.
Yeah. Like, you start off maybe a little overwhelmed, but then as you progress, unlock new abilities. Suddenly you're this whirlwind of gadgets and acrobatics, taking down bad guys left and right. It's like the game mirrors Spider-Man's own journey, right?
Yeah,
From that kind of hesitant teenager to, well, a full-fledged superhero.
exactly. And speaking of Spider-Man's journey, this game does not shy away from some surprisingly heavy story beats.
No, it really doesn't. What struck me reading through these reviews was how blown away everyone was by the story, especially Doc Ock's arc. I mean, it's a classic Spider-Man story. We've seen it before, but the game format gives it this level of emotional depth you just don't get in other mediums. It's true. And when you think about how much time you spend with these characters, the choices you make that directly impact what happens, it's not passive, you're invested, and that changes everything.
100%. Take Doc Ock, for
Yeah.
example. You see his descent from brilliant scientist Peter's friend and mentor all the way down to, well, a vengeful supervillain.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. And that kind of nuance, that slow burn tragedy, it benefits from the interactive nature of a game. It allows for a deeper connection, I think.
Oh, for sure. And it makes you wonder, how would a movie even begin to capture that complexity? But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, there's another aspect of the story I found really cool, and that's the introduction of some lesser-known characters. I'm talking Mr. Negative, specifically.
Yes. And it's actually fascinating how Jeremy Jahns went into this game not knowing anything about Mr. Negative. And for him, that actually made the experience even more engaging, added this layer of mystery and discovery as he learned alongside the player.
It's like stumbling onto a hidden gem, right? And then there's Miles Morales, who, I mean, he's got a surprisingly significant presence in this game.
Right, and it circles back to what we were talking about earlier about player investment. Because even Jeremy Jahns admitted he wasn't sold on Miles as Spider-Man at first, but by the end of the game, he was totally won over.
It really speaks to the power of video games as a storytelling medium, right? You're not just told to care about a character. You experience the world through their eyes, share their struggles. That builds a connection that's tough to replicate anywhere else.
Couldn't agree more. It's a testament to Insomniac's skill as storytellers that they managed to introduce Miles organically, weaving him into the narrative in a way that feels natural but still impactful.
And that's something I really appreciate about this game. It takes the time to flesh out its characters, even those who aren't central to the main plot. But speaking of exploring, let's talk about the world itself. Spider-Man PS4 is an open world game, and like with any open world, there's a mix of the amazing and the, well, maybe not so amazing.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Creating a world that feels alive and engaging, packed with things to do, but also ensuring that those activities feel meaningful and rewarding.
Exactly. And Spider-Man certainly delivers on the things to do front. You've got your crime fighting, your collectibles to hunt down seriously. How many backpacks does Peter Parker lose in a week? And then there are the research stations and those photography challenges.
And this is where the reviewers got some different opinions. While they all agreed that the core gameplay loop, the swinging, the combat, the gadgets remained consistently fun, some felt the side content could get a bit repetitive after a while. IGN, for instance, found some of the open-world activities a little too familiar.
Which makes sense, right? It's the challenge of the open world genre keeping things fresh even after you've sunk hours into the game. But on the flip side, IGN absolutely loved the Taskmaster challenges.
So those were definitely a highlight. They provided a more structured and challenging experience, really pushing players to master the game's combat system and think strategically.
It's like the difference between, say, grabbing a quick slice of pizza and sitting down for a multi-course meal. Sometimes you want that quick, familiar comfort, and sometimes you're craving something a little more intricate and demanding.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of intricate, we can't overlook the technical marvel that is Spider-Man PS4. Even 5 years later, the visuals still hold up remarkably well, especially in the remastered version Jay's reviews played for this deep dive.
Swinging through those streets at night, rain slicking the pavement, the city lights reflecting off Spider-Man's suit. It's breathtaking. It's like you've stepped into a comic book come to life.
And that cinematic quality extends to the character models, particularly for the main cast. They're incredibly expressive, conveying a surprising amount of emotion through their animations and facial expressions.
Right. Remember when that remaster came out and everyone was freaking out about Peter Parker's new face?
Ah, yes. A minor controversy at the time.
Total overreaction, though. Like Jay's review said, you get used to it pretty quickly. It doesn't change the fact that the performances are top-notch, both in voice acting and animation.
Agreed. And that attention to detail, that commitment to creating a believable and immersive world extends to the game's successor, Spider-Man, Miles Morales.
Ah, yes. We can't forget about Miles. Talk about a side character stealing the show. It's fascinating how both Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales resonated so deeply with players, even those who weren't familiar with the comics.
It goes to show the power of strong storytelling and character development.
For sure. Jay's reviews hadn't even seen into the Spider-Verse before playing Miles Morales. Imagine having that be your introduction to the character.
That's remarkable. It speaks to how these games stand on their own as powerful narratives. They introduce characters, build worlds, and tell compelling stories that resonate with players, regardless of their prior knowledge.
It's like they managed to capture that feeling of experiencing Spider-Man for the first time, you know? Whether you're a diehard fan or just discovering the character.
Totally. That sense of wonder and excitement. And they've done it in a way that feels both familiar and fresh.
Yeah.
You know, you've got that classic Spider-Man humor, the heart, but they're also willing to explore those more mature themes, push the boundaries of what a superhero story can be.
Which I think brings us back to that idea of emotional depth we were talking about earlier. I remember Jeremy Jahns saying he'd never felt so much like Spider-Man in a game before, and honestly, that really stuck with me.
It's true, though. And it just goes to show the amount of care, the attention to detail that Insomniac poured into this game. They weren't content with just a fun action game, right? They wanted to create an experience, something that really captured what makes Spider-Man such an enduring and relatable character.
And they absolutely nailed it. It's that combination of like the thrilling gameplay, the heartfelt storytelling, and this genuine love for the source material that makes Spider-Man PS4 and honestly, Miles Morales too, so special. But it does make you wonder, what does this mean for the future of superhero stories? If games can deliver this level of emotional depth, that player agency, can other mediums even compete?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, traditionally, movies and TV shows, those have always been the go-to for superhero stories. But games, they offer something unique. They give you that ability to step into the shoes of these iconic characters, experience their world firsthand.
Exactly. It's not just about watching Spider-Man swing through New York. It's about being Spider-Man, you know? Feeling that wind rush past you, making choices that have real weight, seeing the consequences play out. That level of immersion, it creates a connection, and that's hard to replicate anywhere else.
100%. And as technology keeps evolving, I think we're going to see even more blurring of those lines between games, movies, other forms of media. Who knows what the future holds? Maybe we'll have interactive movies where our choices shape the narrative, or VR experiences that drop us right into those fully realized superhero universes.
Okay, now that would be something else. But hey, for now, I think we can all agree that Spider-Man, PS4, and Miles Morales, they've set a pretty high bar when it comes to superhero storytelling. It's a testament to what video games can do, and I, for one, am excited to see what the future holds for these interactive narratives.
Me too. It's an exciting time to be a gamer and just a fan of storytelling in all its forms.
Well said. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Spider-Man PS4. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep on gaming.